we are at the Blackmagic booth at NAB 2022. It is in the North Hall. So not in the South Hall anymore, which is seems hard to believe, like it's been in the same place forever. But here we are. I'm here with Bob, who we talked to many times before about Resolve and Blackmagic stuff. So here's my first question. All right, Resolve 18 cloud stuff. This is the year of the cloud for Blackmagic as far as Resolve is concerned. When you install Resolve 18, you crank it up and you get to the project manager, there's now a cloud option. Tell us what exactly that option is for when it comes to an editor or anybody jumping into Resolve.
Sure. So the cloud option is to host your project libraries in the cloud. So one person who decides we're going to have collaboration around the world, they can host the library there, and then multiple users can go in and pull down the projects and get going, right? So it's just the framework of the projects, not the storage. That's a different aspect of it.
Okay. Now, when you say the library, what do you mean? Is the library the database, or is the library something different? You can have multiple databases?
The library is the database and the projects that are inside it, right? So you can have multiple libraries, but it's $5 each for the person that's hosting, not the person that's using.
Gotcha. But you can have one library with multiple projects, as in different clients. It's not like it has to be targeted toward one specific job,
it's not one timeline by any means, but yeah, it's a full library. And a lot of people, larger facilities would use a project server in-house, but this is sort of your project server in the sky. So
it is, when you think about Resolve, you've got the disk-based databases, which a lot of people really don't like. I've never had trouble with them, and you've got the SQL. But this in the cloud, this cloud database is it is not a disk-based database. It's not on your disk, but this is the real deal, Resolve database that it's known and famous for.
Exactly, and the synchronization from 18 to it and then to the storage is part of all of the cloud story.
Okay, so let's get into that. So I set up a cloud database, cloud library, and I have an editor. I'm in Nashville, and I've got an editor in New York, and an editor in LA, or colorist in LA. Are you hosting your own cloud storage in the cloud now, and I can put 10 terabytes of media up there, or how do we all work together?
Right, so it's two parts. So the Blackmagic cloud is where you host the library, so everyone pulling down the project files, right, but not the storage itself. So the storage itself, we can generate proxies inside Resolve, send them up through Dropbox or other things, and then it'll synchronize with their network attached storage to pull down proxies, and then eventually you can have it also synchronized to pull down the camera originals if they need it, especially for the colorist.
Gotcha. Now, Dropbox was mentioned in the presentation, the pre-NAB presentation. When you say pull down, if I generate a bunch of proxies through the new Resolve proxy generator, which is its own standalone application, and let me ask you a question about that. That is just generating QuickTime compliant proxies. It's not any kind of weird, folders fire. It doesn't go into the Resolve cache world on your system. Those are proxies that can be done whatever you want with, right?
Exactly. You can move them anywhere, and like we show, you can send them up to Dropbox and then have them pull them down and get started, because obviously those are smaller than sending camera originals.
Now, when you say pulling them down, is that you would put them in Dropbox, the other editor or colorist would sync them to their system and then put them on their local storage, and then it's just like everybody's working with the duplicate media on their local storage?
So it's both ways. They could do it that way or just leave it in Dropbox and use it from there. So they have a choice of which way they want to use it.
Because one thing in the presentation, Dropbox was mentioned specifically, but is it only Dropbox that's supported, or is it kind of any kind of cloud storage?
No, there's any kind of cloud storage, you can do that. Where the Dropbox feature comes in with our storage, because there's a lot better synchronization there, because then it's a full end-to-end Blackmagic workflow.
Gotcha. Now, there's always been collaboration abilities within Resolve, where you can have an editor working and a colorist working. Now, we saw the new ability to update in real time. You get an icon that tells you that, hey, this file has been changed. But that is between pages. So if I understand that right, the collaboration happens, someone can be on the edit page, someone in the color page, someone in the Fairlight page. And if someone does something in the edit page, in that case, you'll get an update option in the color page and the Fairlight page. Is that how?
Exactly. That's the idea. This way they're all notified. And then we also have a chat feature, so you could ping the guy and say, hey, I've done some things, why don't you check it out? Because not everybody sees the icon change all the time, but this way there's a lot more communication.
But there's still no magic where multiple people can work on the same timeline at once.
Yeah, you can work on the same timeline.
Well, I mean, multiple editors like editing on the same timeline in the edit
You can have
page.
multiple editors edit on the same timeline, but you work on versions of the timeline, and then there's a comparative where you can compare what that guy did versus what this guy did. So I think that, and that really is helpful, because it would be difficult to have somebody work on the same edit in the same timeline. You probably wouldn't want that, but you want them to be able to compare the two so that we can decide who did a better job.
Yeah. So you're saying like it'd be like someone working on version 1, timeline called version 1, and someone called on like the alternate version, which is 2 separate timelines.
And then you can compare and update either timeline depending on which way you want to go.
But if let's say you don't want to compare them, but let's say the editor working on timeline 1 needs to update and get the timeline that the other editor was doing, which was, let's say, the alternate version, is there an update feature in that case that pops up the same way in the viewer, or how does that?
So you can always go back to access the other timeline and either duplicate it depending on where it is. Because if you lock it out, then you can't get to it if somebody locks it out. But you have priority, so you can figure out who has priority over the timeline. But it's quite unique the way that we have the updating capability. But there are definitely a couple of different ways to work at it, and that's what we're trying to show now.
Well, I mean, I think, in a collaborative world, it's tricky when you think about multiple editors working on, like, no one ever wants to work on the same timeline. Like, I don't think that capability I think you get in a lot of trouble like that. But let me ask you this. If you've got a colorist who's coloring a timeline the editor's working on, the editor says, you know what, I'm going to chop out these 12 seconds and close the gap. And the colorist is working on those 12 seconds. What happens when they hit the update?
Well, they'll go away, but what you do is if you have good communication, you would notify and say, oh, by the way, I don't know where you are right now, but I'm pulling these out, right? But oftentimes, the smart thing I would think is to save some of the grades, because you never know when something goes out that has to come back later. Yeah. So there's definitely ways to, everyone builds their own unique workflow. We're providing the tools for it, and then because every time I talk to somebody, they I work this way. Well, I work this way. Well, fortunately, you can work both ways if you need to. But that's the way I would do it. Is to make sure that if I'm going to make something dramatic, I need to let the colorist know that he's wasting his time. Maybe.
Communication is the key there. That's why there's a chat feature built in, and you got phones these days, and you got text, and so I think that's the thing.
You got webcam interface, so you can see each other. If you want to do that too. So that's obviously a lot better than getting on the phone. If you can see the expression on the guy's face when he says, "What do you mean you
deleted what?" But very well thought out, which is really great. All right, so move on to the new cloud products. You've got the big boss here, the Cloud Store, the Cloud Store Mini, and then the Cloud Pod.
Yes.
Yeah. How do these actually fit into the mix?
Sure. So the Pod is bring your own storage, but turn your USB-C disks into a network attached storage, right? So there's the 10 gig port here. The HDMI out is on all of the Pod Store, the Cloud Store, the Cloud Store Mini, and the Cloud Pod. So you can see a representation. It's kind of a nerd feature to show a representation of the storage and how it's active, how it's being used, and exactly. So
right there, you can see it.
That's right. So the idea then is you can monitor all the ports that are being accessed, right? But this one is sort of your entry level, bring your own storage, but suddenly turn your USB-C disks into network attached, which is cool.
And this is very intriguing, like the idea that you can put your own storage in there. But like, how does that work in the cloud world? So I have set up a cloud library, and I've got this on my system. I've got the media on a USB-C drive that I'm working from, and I invite a colorist to collaborate with me. Can I plug that USB-C drive in there, and then they access that media right off of there? How does this fit into the mix?
Right. So this with the network connection, then you're able to share or pull down files based on the DaVinci Resolve project that you're using, right? So if you set it up through Dropbox or whatever, you're going to be able to move files backwards and forwards depending on who's the host, right? The project files are separate because that's the Blackmagic cloud where you would pull those down. But this is going to host your storage or be the recipient of storage depending on which end you're on.
So everybody you've invited to collaborate would in a sense, assuming you had this connected to the internet on your system, they would be reading media right off of this, or they would be reading through, copying it to their local storage.
Correct. Yeah, you're moving it through one of the services that moves the files, like Dropbox, whatever, back down to theirs. And depending on the service, some services will host the files in and you can just read them off of there, or you can pull them down to your local storage.
Gotcha. And the difference between this and this one, the 8 terabyte, that's the mini,
right,
just has internal storage built in.
Right, so that has 8 terabytes of internal storage, and it has a 10 gig connection and a 1 gig connection, and the HDMI output.
Gotcha. And on the pod, is that a 1 gig?
Yeah, this is a 10 gig.
10 gig, okay, cool. And I get that, what am I trying to say here? It's really cool stuff. Like, I really like how Blackmagic is sort of, I mean, we're in a cloud-based, remote world, and like, you kind of like going all in on it. And it's kind of a surprise. So what do you see as the next thing? Like, where does cloud go from here?
Well, I think this is the beginning. This is our foray into it. We are here at the show. We announced it ahead of time so that people came in running with good questions, right? I already met a guy who's already used it. He was doing a project with an editor from Ukraine, and they did the whole Resolve 18, and I was like, cool. And then he had some questions. We brought him over. But this way, people came to the show with the questions, so that we're able to kind of, accelerate the progress that we're doing. So, this is a good start. We'll see where we go from here.
Well, there's only going to be more cloud in the world, not less cloud. So at least that's what I think. So, Bob, thank you very much. We look forward to seeing how the cloud moves next time.
All right, great. Thanks for having me.